Okay, just inspect it and make sure my ring is in the groove. It is. So now we have our piston going back together. So another thing that I want to do after I inspect my surfaces, clean those really well. And I have read several things on the internet about whether to oil or lube the connecting rod before you put the bearing in. Again, I think that's a preference. I'm just going to lightly just put a very light coat of oil on those surfaces. Just like the bearings with the crank and the other connecting rods, any of the bearings that I put in, I like to be as easy as possible with them and make sure that they're clean. The way that the bearing goes into the connecting rod is lining up the tang, and then you just gently push it down in there. And again, the same with this. I almost forgot to clean it. Okay, now we have that. And remember, we threw away our bolts because we're going to replace them with the ARP performance studs. ARP can be expensive, but it's the best. It's the best on the market, in my opinion. Did I need to put ARP bolts in it? No. They were having a Father's Day sale at Jegs, and I ordered them through Jegs. It was a really good price. I think it was 20% off, so it was worth it to put the ARP studs in there. But necessary? No. Okay, so now what I want to do is I'm going to go ahead and install my piston rings, and then I'm going to do the final installation on the piston. So the first ring that I like to put in is the oil expander ring, because it has two little grooves that the thinner rings like to sit on. So another thing again is just a little bit of lube. And remember, we've cleaned our piston already. We'll kind of lube it again. This is just enough to get us started. Now, another thing that's very important is clocking the rings. So again, this is the rear of the piston and this is the front. I put the oil expander ring on in the very bottom groove, and notice where the connection is. There's a lot of resources on the internet that will show you exactly, but I like to put where that ring joins right in the center of the connecting rod arm. Then again, these do not have a designation, so you can put them either way. Be careful when you put your rings on and try not to damage them. These generally are pretty easy because they're very pliable and thin. So I'm not really using my pliers on these. Now, there's going to be 2 rings that go here. The bottom ring, if you notice, there are 2 little marks into the piston. That is so that oil can get into the piston. Now, what I want to do is make sure that I'm on the right side, and I'm not, because see, the connector is on this side for the oil expansion ring, which I need to move back over towards the center. And what I want to do is I want to set this base ring, this first ring, I want to put the opening as close as I can to that hole. So then I just slide it up until it pops in. Very nice. Okay, it's in. And that's another reason why I have this tool. You just gently kind of move it over, and then you can reposition this ring. Okay, I like that. All right, then we will do our top oiling ring. Now, so remember, the center of the oiling ring is here. The bottom ring, I put the opening there. The top ring, I'm going to put the opening right here. Okay, and I kind of put my finger here to hold my other rings in place, and then very carefully move the opening. Right where I want it. Okay, so now, being that I put those openings there, now these rings, it does matter. You just want them 90 degrees apart. So remember, the thicker ring with the word top is my next ring that I'm going to install. I like to use ring pliers on these because they're a little bit harder to bend, but they also hold the ring in a good position. Again, we verified that we're top, and now we're going to go onto the piston. And we'll go for the top one. And again, it's not marked, so we're going to go ahead and put it on. You can use your pliers for this one, but it's a little bit thinner and it's easier to handle. Now, let's talk about ring clocking. So again, we got our expander in the center, our 2 expander retaining rings, one here and one here. Now, if you hold the piston in the same direction, which it doesn't matter, but as long as this one is open to the left, and then this one is open to the right. Okay. So now our rings are put on. They are properly in the place that they need to be. I'm going to open my ring compressor. They have a lot of nice ring compressors on the market. This one was 11 bucks. It works. It can be a little finicky, but it gets the job done. Now, the first thing I want to do, again, is I'm going to use some brake clean I've cleaned the cylinder so many times, but I'm going to use this just to clean some more. It's pretty clean. Give that a chance to dry. One thing I like to do is to take an additional filter now. One thing that I like to do, or that you need to do, is that I move the crank position of where the piston's going to mount all the way down, so that when I put the piston in, there's no danger of my connecting rod damaging the work that I did on the crank. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to lube the cylinder before I install the piston. Some people don't like to put oil all in the cylinder, but I am just making sure that I'm going to get that lubed correctly. Shout out to my brother-in-law and my other brother-in-law, his brother, for helping me out. I was struggling a little bit when I first installed the pistons, and I was wondering why it wasn't as smooth as I wanted it to be. And my brothers Jason and Brian said, hey, you need to put a little bit more lube onto the engine when you assemble it. So thanks, fellas. I appreciate you. Shout out. All right. Another thing to do too with your ring compressor is to put a little oil in it, which I already have. You want to be careful. The edges of it are sharp. But it's time to put the piston in. So, again, arrow goes to the front of the engine. I like to put my ring compressor. I need to open it a little bit more. There we go. I put my piston up a little bit higher because then it allows me to feed it down. I find that works the best with this one. Try to get it as straight as I can. I feel like that's good. And then I want to tighten it. Now, I want to set my piston as it would go in the cylinder with the arrow pointing to the front of the engine. Try to keep it lined up as much as possible. I'm going to use my hammer and just the wooden part, and I'm going to lightly tap the piston down. And kind of move. And it just slides down in there. All right, so the piston is in the cylinder, and I kind of stick my hand into the cylinder bore, and I can see I can feel the connecting rod. And again, I'm just lightly tapping. All right, I'm gonna flip the engine over. And now I can see my connecting rod. I'm going to take a second and position my crank a little bit better because I still have to check the front bearing clearance. So we're going to put it right up to about here. That's a good spot. Kind of wipe a spot down. I've already cleaned it, but I want to, because I was checking the clearance on those, I just want to make sure I have a good surface to be able to check the bearing clearance. And then I'm going to kind of hold it with both hands. And remember, whenever you're using plastic gauge, this again is a dry fit. I'm going to clean out a spot. And then we'll get some plastic gauge. And unfortunately, I'm going to have to turn my fan off for this one because I don't want anything to move the plastic gauge. So just like we have on the rest of the engine. Now, you can also, even though it's a dry fit, you could put a little dab of oil to hold it in place. It's not going to bother much. And also, plastic gauge, on the plastic gauge website, you can leave the plastic gauge in there after you check the clearance, because it says it won't affect the running of the engine. It'll just basically melt away. Me, I like to clean as much as possible, and then I do it. So we want to put our connecting rod cap back on, and I want to make sure that I get it into the proper orientation. Okay. Now, with the ARP fasteners, when I do the install for those, you need to use this assembly lube. And there's two ways that you can install these to make sure that they're done correctly. You can do what's called the torque method, or you can also do a stretch method. If you want to see how to do the stretch to fit method, you can check it out on the internet. I prefer to do the torque because I know that the value that I'm putting in it is right, and I'm not building a high performance, boosted application, so I'm not really too concerned with exact fitment. Okay. And you're going to use your torque wrench on this. It is to 40 foot-pounds. And I'm only going to go to 20 to begin with. I had a lot of movement on this one, so I'm taking that out because I'm really not sure if it causes extra torque. And I'm doing the 40 foot-pounds as recommended by the fastener manufacturer. Okay, now I'm going to go to 40. Now we're going to remove these and check our bearing clearance. A lot of people suggest that you do not use power tools on the engine, and I usually don't, but if it's just to save myself some wrist movement, then that is okay. I don't use it to torque. Just going to set these right here to remind me which side they go on. And I already have a plastic gauge. This is inches, and that is millimeter. So I'm going to check millimeter. I'm generally looking at the white, which is 0.038, and on this side 0.0015. Now that's a good measurement, showing that I have good clearance and it's within specification, because I have it wrote down here. The metric is 0.011 through 0.051 and 0.0043, 0.002. So we are definitely within clearance. Oh, and then the bearing clearance, sorry, is 0.009 through 0.0025. And yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. You want to go potty? I'll be right back. Okay, so we're back after that exciting bathroom break that Miss Daisy May decided to tell me in stereo. So now we're going to remove as much of the plastic gauge as possible. And being that we know that the surface is good, I'm going to lightly tap with the wood again, or any kind of soft rubber, or you just don't want a metal to metal. I'm going to lightly tap the connecting rod away. Just enough where I can raise it up. to lube the surfaces. Well, have to get that one. Okay, so maybe not sitting on the engine's the best idea, but it's going to be easy to get out. We'll just flip the engine over. Okay, so now let's lube the surface. Oh yeah, you go through a lot of gloves if you are very picky like I am. Sometimes I'm picky, sometimes I'm not as far as cleanliness, but you know, as long as I'm having fun, this is what it's about. You also want to lube the sides of the crank because the piston and the sides of the connecting rod, because that rubs against other parts in the engine. So I feel like I have enough lube on that. Oh, you know what? I'm going to wait. I'm going to push my piston back up. And again, just very light taps. If you have to hit it any harder than that, something's wrong. Which brings me up to a point of when I first started installing the pistons. As I mentioned, I had to call my brother-in-law Brian and his brother Jason. Thanks, guys. I had the rings mixed up, and it was causing the pistons to bind really bad, and I could tell something was wrong. And I thought I'd done everything right, but I had switched to the piston rings. It would have saved me a big headache if I would have paid a little bit closer attention. Okay, so now let's finish getting this thing installed. Remember what I was saying about lining up to make sure that the connecting rod is on in the right position. Lube the bearing. I'm lubing the sides. And put this in place. Beautiful. All right, so as I mentioned, we're gonna have to get that other bolt, but for now I'm gonna put, wait, it goes on this side. That's right, that's why I placed them there in the first place, huh? And again, I'm just going to just take it down just a little. I don't want to put any torque on it. Now, let's get our other bolt. There it is. To make sure there's nothing on it, and we're clean. Yeah, it's basically making sure they're hand tight. So, the next step is now I need to torque. Yes, ma'am? What? What? What you want to tell me? Huh? What you want to tell me? Because you've had treats. is I want to torque all the bolts down. So I'm going to use this to gently move it where I can get to bolts pretty easy. So I'm going to do cylinders 1 and 2. Remember, it is 20 then 40. And I'm going to use the extension here because it's going to make it easier. I don't think that it causes a big difference, but I don't know. So I'll have to research that. Let's go to 20. I'm going to do all 4. And notice how easy the engine turns. That lets me know that I'm doing something semi-right. So I'm going to repeat that process, rolling it until I tighten all the connecting rod bolts. You know what, I think I'm just going to leave it on 40 and just make it a little bit faster. And I'm basically just tightening it where it feels snug. And then I'll take it to torque. So far today, what we have done is we have permanently installed the pistons. We rebuilt a piston. We're almost done with the short block. So short block is like the bottom end. So this technically puts us past the short block phase going into the long block. And the very next step that we're going to do is I still have one thing that I wanted to cover, but it's perhaps one of the most important parts of the engine. And it's going to be in the beginning when I mentioned the oil diverter, the barbell. That's what a lot of people call it. I want to go over the installation and where it's going to go. And we were good. Let's turn it back over. Maybe I can move it a little. Get a little bit better light. There we go. Okay, so this is where the oil diverter goes. And the first thing that I want to do is test fit. We can't get it past that. Well, the cool thing on an engine stand is we still have 3 supporting it, so I'm probably going to just remove this arm or just get it out of the way. to make sure that it's somewhat clean. I mean, you actually want it really clean. All right, again, we will go with the test fit. When you put it into the engine, I always think the thicker side goes in forward, or the O-ring goes closest to you. Oh, it's a great fit, great fit, great fit. Okay, so now, clean again. And we want the O-ring. Okay, so with the O-ring, I like to put a little oil on it. We don't need the bag anymore. Gasket is on. Beautiful fit, and that's where it goes. All right. Oh, crank position sensor. That's right. Almost forgot. All right, let me reattach my engine stand. And let's put in the crank position sensor. So here's the new crank position sensor. And see, notice it has a blue O-ring. Again, why don't we put some oil on it before we install it. And there's a little bit of this left over for anti-seize purposes. Now this, if I remember correctly, is 18 or 20 foot-pounds. I'll put it in the video, but I'm going to do it to 18 until I research it and figure out exactly what the specs are. But they're usually, it's pretty safe on these blocks, 18 to 20 pounds. So it is the rear bottom right And if you look down in there, you'll see the crank. And this is how the sensor mounts. You push in the sensor to line up with the bolt hole, and you'll hear it snap. And then you can put your mount screw in. And again, I'm not sure, so I'm going to do the 18, or I can take 2 seconds. Look. Oh, okay. So it is 18 foot-pounds. All right, everybody. Thanks for stopping by. I'm going to say bye, Boone. And I appreciate everything. I want to give a shout out to Brian Tooley Racing. Thank you for the support. Also, Brian Gill and Jason Gill. You guys are awesome. Jason, thanks for coming through, brother. Brian, thank you too. I appreciate everything and keeping me on track with this project. Other than that, I look forward to the next step. We're going to be putting the camshaft in. I've been super excited about this because it's a stage 2 sloppy cam. I can't wait to get it installed. I love seeing it come together. Thanks everybody for your support, and stay tuned for some of Baby Blue's actions. Again, thanks everybody. I appreciate the views. Please smash the like, the subscribe, and follow my Instagram, Morgan Motor 64. Take care. Thank you.